Well, hi everybody. I am Jeff Ellenbogen. I am the Director of Innovation and Technology at a school near Boulder, Colorado called Dawson. I would call myself a passionate, lifelong maker, and for the last 10 years, I've been a maker educator. I'm formerly a math teacher. I've been really fortunate to be at this school, Dawson, for almost half my life. This is my 24th year. We opened a new innovation center here where I get to teach in our makerspace, and it's been an unbelievable journey. Ultimately, what I get to talk about today is something that I think is really important, which is how can we understand what students are actually learning when they take part in a course that we teach or a workshop that they take part in. Rather than just focusing on the finished product, it's to me much more important to talk about what have they learned and how do you actually know what they learned. I'm not giving any tests, obviously. All right, so um, I thought I'd start off with like my personal goals for what trying to achieve with my students. I mean, ultimately, I definitely want to build on the skills they're coming into the class with. For the course I'm really going to focus on today, which is called Inventing with Technology. I'm focused on 3D modeling, electronics, and coding, but we teach all sorts of other classes in our Innovation Center Makerspace that aren't those specific skills. So I'm trying to build skills. I'm really excited for students to explore and do self-directed learning. As a former math teacher, I really did get burnt out, and I think the kids did too, on, hi, I have all this information and I need to give it to you. And that's definitely what I'm trying to avoid in my Makerspace class. I'm hoping to give them some baseline skills, and I'll talk a little bit about that more later, and then have them guide their own learning. Um, as part of that learning, there's a lot of problem solving and iteration. I used to try to do a lot of projects in one semester, and now I really try to do one major project so that they have an opportunity to iterate on that project, as opposed to trying to rush through something so I can get to another thing. Another really important thing to me is taking advantage of the cool opportunities they have in these maker spaces. So I want to try to think through what are the ways to optimize what they get out of that experience. And I'll talk about the structure of how some of the documentation and reflection I'm doing really kind of encourages what they do when they're in class as well. I want them to reflect on their learning, and I want them ultimately to be able to share their story. That's how we're going to know what they do and what they've, I'm sorry, that's how we're going to know what they've learned, is by how they can portray that information to someone else. So I have three main ways that I do that in my classes that I'll talk about. All right, so here are some of the challenges that I think are not unique to me. I, again, want to understand what are they taking away from this besides the physical thing they made. My students do make really cool things. That isn't necessarily what I'm going for. I'm going for that as a vehicle to be able to share that learning. So I want them to be able to demonstrate it to others. I also struggle with the fact that I'm working with kids that are a wide variety of ages and skill sets. So I work with 9th through 12th graders. Some of them have taken other courses from us before. Some of them have parents that may know a lot about this. They may have done something in advance of taking the class. So I'm working with kids at all different levels. I'm sure you are too. Um, I actually struggle a lot with students who come in and don't really know what to do with the spaciousness of the classroom. And I don't just mean that it's big, I mean, there's a lot of room for exploring. And some students have literally said to me, I don't even know where to start. So trying to come up with what's the right balance of building skills and giving student choice is another challenge that I'm definitely focused on. And the last thing is I just don't want kids to come in and waste time, whether that's they come in and want to work on something else because they're not interested, or they come in and don't feel motivated to make progress on their projects. Some of the systems that I'm going to talk about in a minute, I think, do a good job of helping kids consistently work basically every time they come in, because there's tangible things to do on a weekly basis. For context, my class happens 2 times a week for an hour and a half each time, and sometimes I get a bonus hour and a half. So usually I get 3 hours a week, sometimes it's 4.5 hours. All right, so last thing before I dig into the actual documentation and sharing is like, what's the framework for this class? I'm always giving kids a balance of some kind of a constraint, but a lot of openness and a lot of choice of the direction they take it. So in this project that I'm going to talk about in a minute, actually, I'll talk right now. Last semester, my course is called Inventing with Technology. So again, I'm trying to teach them a little bit about 3D modeling, a little bit of electronics prototyping, and a lot about self-exploration and problem solving, and then ultimately like thinking about what are they learning along the way. So for this project, the only constraints were they needed to build a 3D model of whatever their project was going to be. That project needed to include a French cleat, which we spent some time investigating. What is a French cleat good for? Why would you use a French cleat for something? And it needed to include a microbit. So they had to do some programming electronics with a microcontroller and kind of come up with a use. So we did a little bit of scaffolded learning. What can the microbit do? And we did that kind of an I do, you do. Here's a way to turn on an LED. Here's how I make a little animation using the 5 by 5 matrix. Very small, tangible projects. And kids who had more experience might be able to make those more complicated. It just gives kids a chance to kind of build their baseline skills. And then we start talking about, okay, we're going to build a major project. What's your project going to be? All it has is these two constraints of has to hang with a French cleat. Think about why you might build your thing to use a French cleat. What are you taking advantage of the feature of the French cleat? And what feature of a microbit might serve a purpose that you're interested in? I have two projects here. I'll just briefly mention them. The bottom picture is of a shoe rack. The student loved playing sports, had tons of different sports shoes she wanted to be able to display and said, I'm going to make this shoe rack hang in my closet. I want to make it modular so I can move it up and down. She was eventually going to build several. And she added LEDs to kind of illuminate the things that would hang out underneath the shoe rack. And the one on top is really cool. That was actually it's almost like a sconce. I called it a chandelier, but it hangs on the wall. That has a double French cleat. It's kind of hard to tell, but the entire unit comes on and off the wall. And there are modular French cleat kind of like a lampshade, I guess. That front piece comes off, and there's several different versions of that as well. And we'll talk more about the product in a minute. Ultimately, what I'm looking for beyond building their skills is giving them a chance to ideate and come up with possible solutions and then take their project wherever they want to. All right. So how do we actually, this is the point of the whole talk. How do we actually understand what they've learned? Okay, so for me, I know a lot of people do some form of a journal or a design sketchbook or something like that. I, on a weekly basis, expect the students to record their progress. And this does a bunch of different things. One is it keeps them moving forward. For a student who says, I'm good, I don't really need to work today, they know they have an assignment that's a graded assignment. We'll talk about grading in a minute, that they're going to have to submit on a weekly basis to say, well, what did I learn this week? What was a milestone this week? If they haven't done anything, it makes it really hard to do the journal. So it works well for that. But ultimately, it's the main way they can reveal to me and their parents at a parent conference and at the end of the semester when we're sharing it all with what did I actually accomplish along the way? What were all the steps that maybe they forget some of them when they get to the end of the project? This gives them that journal to go back to and look at and reflect on all the way through the whole process. So I'll talk more about the journals in a little bit, but this has been one of the biggest things that I've solved a lot of the challenges of teaching a makerspace class with. I'll talk a little bit about something I'm new at, which is using kind of what I'm calling an edge social tool, which is basically kind of looks like Facebook or Instagram, but it's a closed educational tool. I'm using something called Unruler, which is new to me from this year, but it gave kids a chance to share directly with each other and get feedback from each other. So they'll ask each other questions, maybe ideate with someone of like, how do you think I could solve this problem? Rather than having them do that in class when they're all working, I found that using this tool offline on Ruler worked really well for that. And I'll show a little bit about that towards the end. And ultimately, telling kids from the beginning, you're going to be showing off this major project at the end to a live audience and talk about it and tell your story. I'm expecting them to have a physical object that they've made and a digital presentation that is a subset of this giant journal they've built through the whole semester. So let me dig in a little further. I know this is a very quick session. I don't want to talk a lot about grading. To me, grading is the least important part of all of this, but unfortunately, I am in the world that many of you probably are where classes are graded. So I tried to make my grading system achieve some of my goals. So number one, I'm looking for kids to push themselves. I feel like every student who comes into my class thinks they're an A student, but a lot of them don't really want to work for the A. They just want the A. So I've kind of tried to incentivize working harder and going beyond the baseline. So for me, if you do an assignment and you just kind of check the boxes and achieve the things that I've asked you to do, that's a B, that's an 8 out of 10. And I tell them if on your journal or on your major project or any of these other things you want to score an A or a higher grade, you've got to go above and beyond. You've got to take your project farther than just I checked the baseline boxes. That has worked fairly well for me. Ultimately, I'm not grading them on like how pretty the thing they made is. It's more about them thinking and reflecting on their learning, trying their best and putting in the effort to make something really cool. Um, One of the things that I'll talk about in a moment is like how I can get kids involved with grading. So I, as much as possible, talk with them about like what are their learning goals for the class. What, like for example, participation. I have them self-assess their participation. So I'll ask them, I'm going to go to my next slide. What kinds of things do you think are important to do well in a makerspace class? The four categories at the bottom were created by my students last semester. I redo this every time I teach a class with the kids, and I say, what matters? How can you show that you've worked hard in this class, both in class and outside of class? So they came up with these four categories. These four categories were something that they wrote about in one of their journals. I think for week 5, I had them assess themselves in this way. So they, for that journal, instead of writing about what they did that week, they wrote about the first 5 weeks of the class, graded themselves for these four categories, and kind of wrote a narrative for why they deserved the grade they gave themselves. Every time I've done this, students have, I would say 90% of them graded them basically exactly how I would have. And typically, the ones who grade themselves differently from what I'm assuming they would are undergrading themselves. And then I have a conversation and say, actually, you've done really well at this. You're being harsh with yourself. It's very, very rare that a student will over-assess themselves. But I tell them, I'm going to review this and we'll talk about it if the grade doesn't make sense. It's really neat to have the kids think through how did I do in the class? What would I give myself? We actually have our English department who's doing something very similar, and this has worked well for them. I took this idea and kind of made it my own for the makerspace. All right, so that's a lot of the like setting the stage. This is actually going to be a few slides of an example from one of my students. I got permission from one of my students who built a really cool project that I'll show you in a minute. And this is just 4 or 5 slides from her week 7 journal, just to give you a sense of the kind of work that the students are creating. So I'm asking them to include photos, screenshots, sketches. It can be anything, a screen capture from a video. A lot of times they'll capture the make code simulator showing their code because that's something that we're doing. So again, this has 2 videos, which I'm not going to show right now because that'll take too much of the 20 minutes. And I want to hear from you all too. But um, this is her kind of brainstorming the next step. So she wanted to make, this project was going to be a fence mounted planter box to hang on a fence in the backyard. And she wanted to do monitoring of the weather. So it was a moisture sensor in the soil combined with sunlight and also the temperature. And she needed a way to enclose this thing. So she was looking online to find what different ways could she seal the microbit and protect it from the weather. This is a sample of her code. Again, sometimes the kids will actually screen capture the video so they can demo the code and show it. I don't tell them what they need to capture. I just require that they normally would have 1 or 2 screenshots, videos, etc., and they get to decide how they're going to document it. And then again, I often will ask them a specific prompt, like, tell me what you're going to do for the next week. That's an obvious, easy one. That way, when they come into class, they're ready to work and they have a plan already. So in this case, she's drawing out a sketch of what she thinks she needs to do. She's talking about building a wooden box. She actually went to Lowe's and picked out some cedar because she knew she needed wood that could withstand being used in the outdoors. I'm going to show a little bit more about how that stuff turns into the final presentation in another slide, but I wanted to at least briefly talk about Unruler. Again, I'm new at this. I'd say some of the things I've tried didn't work well. At one point, I was having students share things from their journal and put it again into Unruler because no one can see the journal but me and the student. And Unruler is a closed environment just for our students. It does allow you to publish things. This view I'm showing you screenshots of right now has shortened their names just down to their initials so that it can be more publicly shared. But when they're actually in there, it shows their full names. They can actually see more because it's only closed to the students. But you get the same idea here. This is multiple screenshots, but students are sharing videos. They're writing a little comment for themselves, and then students are giving each other ideas. I think my biggest takeaway from this is that encouraging interaction is way better than just having them take the same kind of thing they put in the journal and throwing it up there and saying, hey, look what I did. If they're asking each other questions or saying, here's a problem, what do you think? That's a much better use of this tool. These are 2 slides from students' final presentations. Again, at the end of the semester, we have a live showcase amongst all the classes in our department in the Innovation Center. This is a student kind of summarizing for multiple weeks various phases of the project they built. This was actually a really cool project. They built a ski boot drying mechanism. So it had two computer fans that were connected to a microcontroller, and they were able to control how long the fans would stay on using it. And that part was fairly simple. It was a 15-minute countdown timer for how long the boots would dry. But they had to play with how do they get it to hold together, the sketches, the code, all that's kind of represented in these phases in this slide. And then the students often summarize what were the big takeaways from this? What were my challenges? What was the thing I struggled with most? Again, this is a summary part taken from that journal. The kids don't struggle to make these really nice presentations because all semester long they've been building the journal. And finally, at the end, I tell them this is an authentic thing. This is going to be shared. The QR code that I have here, if you were to scan that, you would be able to go directly to this live on the internet group of all their final galleries. I don't want to take too long. I'm not going to click the link I have embedded in here. But all 16 of the students' projects are visible. Anyone can look at it. These students can use it for a part of a college application, perhaps, or an internship. This is real. They're sharing it with the world, and they use these presentations both in the real world during the showcase and they're online in perpetuity. And I show these to the students the next year to give them ideas of kind of setting the bar for what kind of projects people would do.
Jeff, you have 8 minutes left.
Okay. Well, let me just give one more pitch because this might be something people want to talk about, which is Dale mentioned Dawson School because I've reached out to Dale a few times and I appreciated that. We're going to have what I think is going to be really cool this summer in Colorado. If anyone wants to come hang out and make something crazy with their colleagues or colleagues from around the world, this QR code will take you to this. This is an opportunity to kind of come into a makerspace with other experienced maker educators and dream big. I just wanted to put a pitch out there that I would love to learn with you this summer if you're interested. So I can flip around. I'm happy to talk to other people. I don't know, Yvonne, if this is going to be shared out, if there's a way for me to share this presentation with people in an email, I'm happy to. I actually have a QR code to the presentation. So if anyone wants to try to capture that, if you're not going to get the presentation, this would allow you to go through the slides again.
We
And
are
it
we are
does.
going to share the video. So I guess that
Okay.
if someone wants the presentation, perhaps we can discuss with Liz and she can arrange it.
So why don't I stop sharing and let's just talk about this stuff. I'd love to hear what other people have tried and answer any questions.
Yeah, actually, Danielle had a lot of questions. So perhaps you can open the mic and talk. Danielle, are you here? Yeah.
I am. Hi, how are you? Thanks for the presentation, Jeff. I
Awesome.
just wanted to scope it, just like I'm a educator as well. I'm in East Palo Alto up in California at a high school. It's a charter school, and it sounds like we got some similar experience. But how many students are in one session of your class? Um, and what other questions did I ask? I was
Well, I
like,
answer that quick. 16 is
yes,
the cap for the class that I teach,
okay. And
which is,
then go
let me
ahead.
just address that really quick, which is like, I would love to take more kids, but 16 kids all working on independent projects is insane. And that could be a whole nother session because I've tried so many different things and I would love to dig into that if that's something else people want to talk about because managing 16 different projects is really challenging and making sure you don't only help the kids that speak up the most is something that I'm really trying to struggle with and work through. But ask your other questions. I'd love to hear more.
One was just around, do you share a syllabus with the students and or the parents and with us? And the last one was around how do you do some smaller formative assessments inside of what you're doing? Because it sounds like you get the journal and the edu-social, but like real time in IRL, in real
Yeah.
life, like what kind of things do you do in the classroom?
Yeah. I mean, the edgy social thing is interesting because everyone always says you can't get kids to do things if you don't grade it. And I don't grade the unruler at all. I never even talk about it other than I say this is part of participation and then they grade themselves. So that's one of the things that they think about when they're grading themselves is, did I participate in the things that he asked me to do online and ruler? I never graded. The only formative things I'm doing is when we were learning to 3D model, the thing I always do because we use microbits every year is they model the microbit. And so that's more of a formative thing. I'm saying, okay, these are the exact things I'm looking for as you model the microbit. It has to be designed with every sketch fully defined, for example. And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of 3D modeling, but those are the kind of formative things I'm doing to build the baseline skills before I say you're set free. And really beyond that, every kid's project is so different. I don't have anything I'm doing formative besides the three things that we've already talked about. I mean, there's the journal, and it's really about them telling their story. All of it is you tell me what you learned, you show other people what you learned, and you be prepared to share that with the world. I can't remember if you had other questions I didn't answer.
No, that was great. Thanks.
Okay.
Yes, Andrea is asking if do you have another adult support with you?
We have a makerspace director. I'm not that person. I'm the department chair. So there is another person in the space. So I'm not fixing the 3D printer while I'm already doing other things. He is not teaching the class with me. But if I've had a student who wants to weld. If a student wants to weld, they'll sometimes go to this colleague and say, hey, could you teach me to weld? They'll get something on the calendar. It may or may not be during class. There's only so many things I actually can open up. Like, for example, we have CNC equipment. I don't use that in this class. But let's say a student took a different class with the CNC, they might be able to use something they've already learned within the scope of this class, depending on availability, that kind of thing. If I don't limit it to typically the things in our main makerspace that are not special tools in other rooms next to it, it just gets too big of a scope.
Yeah, we
and
have.
becomes more. It's already crazy.
There is also a question about the materials. Who is providing the materials? Does the school provide the project materials? And if the students do have certain budget for the
Right.
project?
That's a great question. And I'm teaching a different class this semester on entrepreneurship, and I'm trying to focus on them thinking through the cost of everything. In this class, the materials that are included are, I won't say infinity microbits, but typically one or two, depending if they want to talk to each other with 2 microbits. All the things in our makerspace, like wood and 3D printer and paper and laser cutter stuff, all of that is included in the class. The only things that I would ask a student to buy is if they have some sort of niche product they want for something they're going to make. Like we didn't carry cedar. That student went to Home Depot and bought 2 boards of cedar because they were making something for the outdoors. So it mostly is covered by our department's budget, but when kids want something special, they go out. I'm remembering that Danielle asked another question about curriculum. The one challenge is my curriculum is really what's the concept for the semester. I do build this journal for myself of what is my trajectory every year, and it's sort of every week I'm kind of thinking through what do I need to do next with the kids. But I actually have never taught the class the same. Every single time I come up with a new thing because I'm always wanting to make it better. And I also want, if the kid wanted to take it twice, to be able to take the class and have a different experience the next time.
Charles is saying that she cannot open the QR code. We will try to share the presentation with all of you. So if Jeff
Okay.
can send it to us, we can share with the
Sure. And my
participants.
email is right at the top. Please email me. I thought I tested all 3 QR codes. There was one on each of those slides. Maybe one of them is shared improperly and they opened for me and I made a mistake, but please email me. I want to share everything. And that's why I'm doing that Maker Jam thing that's not about making money. You'll notice it's very affordable. It's just, this is the thing I care about the most, as many of you probably do. So I will happily answer any questions whenever you send.
There are many questions, so perhaps you're going to receive a lot of emails because we have around 1 minute left. So I can take this one from Kevin. How long does it take on average for each project?
I would have a 16-week semester approximately, and I would say the first 6 weeks are building the skills, and the final 10 weeks are preparing to show off your final project. So, I mean, I would say about 2.5 months, I guess. And that's, with an average of 4 hours a week in class. I can't tell you how many of these kids come in outside of class. I have so many students that are coming in during their free periods and study halls and lunches because that's the dream, right? They actually want to do the thing and they're not there because of the grade. I mean, ultimately, I'm very fortunate that these students have been motivated to come in. I'd say only, 40% of them are working outside of class, but for those kids who are really into it, it's amazing.